The call from beyond. The crystalline spires of Illyrian Prime gleamed in the light of three setting suns, their translucent surfaces refracting the dying day into a kaleidoscope of colors. In her observatory at the highest point of the capital city, Commander Leora Thel watched the stars emerge with growing dread. Her six-fingered hands trembled slightly as she manipulated the holographic display, the bioluminescent patterns across her blue skin pulsing with anxiety. "It's confirmed, then?" she asked, her melodic voice unnaturally tight. Chief Scientist Maven nodded, his own skin patterns dimmed with resignation. "The long-range sensors cannot be mistaken. The Harvester fleet has altered course. They will reach our system in 7 rotations." Leora closed her large, silver eyes briefly. 7 rotations. Less than 2 weeks in the old Earth calendar. She had studied in her xenohistory courses. Not enough time to evacuate even a fraction of their population of 12 billion souls. How many ships? 23 capital vessels, with approximately 70 support craft. Maven replied, his voice hollow. Twice the size of the fleet that destroyed the Vexari Confederation. The Vexari, a peaceful coalition of 3 species that had been utterly eradicated 6 cycles ago. The Harvesters had descended on their worlds, stripped them of all resources, including their populations, and left nothing but barren rocks orbiting dead stars. The Illyrians had received their distress calls too late, arriving only to find ruins and silence. "The Planetary Council is convening now," said Counselor Talus from the doorway, her ceremonial robes shimmering with embedded data crystals denoting her status. "They demand options, Commander. Options. As if they had any. The Illyrian Confederation was peaceful by nature and philosophy. Their technology was advanced, among the most sophisticated in the known galaxy for communication, medicine, and quality of life. But their weapons were defensive at best. They had never needed more. Until now. "We've sent diplomatic communications," Leora said, following Talus toward the council chambers. As expected, there was no response. "No one has ever communicated successfully with the Harvesters," Talus replied. "They harvest. They do not negotiate." The Planetary Council chamber was a vast amphitheater, with 12 tiered levels representing the original colony worlds of the Illyrian people. Today, all 200 counselors were present, their skin patterns a chaotic mix of fear, anger, and despair that illuminated the chamber like a storm of fireflies. High Chancellor Divan rose from the central podium, his ancient face solemn. "Commander Thel, your assessment." Leora stepped forward, her military uniform, rarely worn in their peaceful society. Drawing all eyes. "The Harvester fleet will reach our system in 7 rotations. Based on previous encounters documented by our observation outposts, they will bypass the outer colonies and strike directly at Illyrian Prime. Their pattern is always the same. They neutralize defensive capabilities, then begin systematic extraction of resources." "Resources including our people," someone murmured. "Yes," Leora confirmed. "The Harvesters collect biological material with the same efficiency they mine rare elements." "What are our options for evacuation?" asked a counselor from the agricultural world of Illyrian IV. Leora shook her head. "With our entire transport fleet mobilized, we could evacuate perhaps 40 million people, less than 0.5% of our total population." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. "There is another possibility," Leora said carefully, "one that has never been attempted." "Speak freely, Commander," urged the High Chancellor. Leora's skin patterns intensified, pulsing with determination. "The Deep Signal Project." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The Deep Signal was theoretical, a communication technology designed to penetrate the fabric of space-time itself, potentially reaching across the galaxy instantaneously. It had been developed but never tested because of its enormous power requirements, and one critical unknown. No one knew who or what might receive it. "The power drain would leave us vulnerable," objected Counselor Talus. "We're already vulnerable," Leora countered. "The Deep Signal could reach parts of the galaxy we've never explored." civilizations we've never contacted. Someone, somewhere might help. Or they might be worse than the harvesters, warned another counselor. High Chancellor Deven raised his hands for silence. What would this signal contain, Commander Thel? Everything, Leora replied. Our history, our culture, our scientific achievements, and proof of the harvester threat. We would be offering knowledge in exchange for salvation. The debate lasted through the night. Dawn was breaking over the capital when the council finally reached its decision. By a narrow margin, the Deep Signal Project was authorized. For the next 3 days, Leora and Maven worked without rest, calibrating the massive transmitter built into the heart of Alarian Prime's moon. The device had been constructed decades ago, but left dormant. A technological achievement with no practical purpose until now. Power systems at maximum capacity, Maven reported, his eyes fixed on the control panel. The signal is encoded and ready for transmission. Leora took a deep breath, her skin pulsing with a complex pattern of hope and fear. Initiate deep signal. The transmitter hummed to life, drawing power from the moon's core reactor. Lights dimmed across the entire lunar base as energy was channeled into the device. There was no visible beam, no dramatic light show, just a silent pulse that rippled through subspace, carrying the essence of an entire civilization's plea for help. And then they waited, watching as the harvester fleet grew ever closer on their sensors. The response came 52 hours later. Leora was in her quarters, snatching a few hours of restless sleep, when her communication implant chimed urgently. She was fully alert in an instant. Commander, Maven's voice was strange, tight with something that might have been fear or awe. We've received a response to the deep signal. 3 minutes later, Leora stood in the observatory, staring at the decoded message floating in the holographic display. It was brief, encoded in a mathematical sequence that spoke of technology far beyond their own. Signal received. Coordinates confirmed. Hold position. Salvation approaches. Can we identify the source? Leora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maven shook his head. The signal used our own transmission frequency, but amplified and refined in ways our technology cannot duplicate. Whoever sent this, they're far more advanced than we are. More advanced than the harvesters. Possibly. Leora felt a complex mix of hope and dread. They had cast their desperate message into the void, and something had answered. But who? And what price would they demand for their help? They received no further communication for almost 2 full rotations. The harvester fleet continued its inexorable approach, now close enough that their massive ships could be detected by standard sensors. The evacuation of critical personnel had begun, though everyone knew it was largely symbolic. Most Ilarians would face whatever came together on their homeworld. Leora was on the command deck of the orbital defense station when the sensors detected the anomaly. Massive spatial distortion forming at the edge of the system, reported the sensor officer, her skin flashing with alarm patterns. Nothing like the harvester drives. Show me, Leora ordered. The main screen displayed the distant reaches of the Ilarian system, where space itself seemed to fold and ripple. A shimmering point of light appeared, expanding rapidly into a swirling vortex that dwarfed anything they had ever seen. Energy readings are off the scale, Maven whispered beside her. Whatever is generating that portal is drawing more power than our entire civilization uses in a year. Through the massive spatial distortion emerged a single ship. Sleek and deadly, it gleamed with a metallic sheen that seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously. It was smaller than the harvester vessels, but radiated power in a way that made everyone on the command deck instinctively tense. Single vessel approaching, the communications officer reported. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through, Leora ordered. A voice filled the command deck, speaking perfect Ilarian with only the slightest accent. Ilarian Defense Command. This is Captain James Donovan of the Earth vessel Nemesis. We received your deep signal. Your coordinates are confirmed, and we've analyzed the harvester fleet's approach vector. We're here to help. Please stand by for our diplomatic envoy. Earth. A world from ancient legends, a planet so distant that most Illyrians considered it mythical if they had heard of it at all. Humanity was known to exist, somewhere in the far reaches of the galaxy, but they were isolationists who rarely ventured beyond their own territory. No Illyrian had ever met a human in person. "They're launching a shuttle," reported the sensor officer. "Small craft, minimal weapons signature." "Direct them to Landing Bay 3, Leora decided. "I'll meet them personally." 20 minutes later, Leora stood in the landing bay as the human shuttle docked with impossible precision. The craft was unlike any vessel she had ever seen. All clean lines and understated power, with no visible propulsion system. The airlock cycled, and a single figure emerged. The human was tall, clad in a form-fitting uniform of dark material that seemed to shift and adapt to their movements. Captain Donovan, Leora presumed, removed their helmet, revealing features that were both alien and strangely familiar. The human skin was a warm brown, without bioluminescence, and their eyes were a startling green that seemed to evaluate everything with keen intelligence. "Commander Thel," the human said, offering a formal bow. "Captain James Donovan, Earth Defense Force. Thank you for receiving me." "Captain," Leora returned the bow. "You said you're here to help. How did you receive our signal? Earth is legendary to us. Few believe it even exists." A slight smile curved Donovan's lips. "That's by design, Commander. Earth and humanity have existed in isolation for centuries, not because we couldn't reach the stars, but because we chose to watch and wait." "Watch and wait for what?" Leora asked, gesturing for Donovan to follow her toward the station's conference room. "For exactly this moment," the human replied, their voice solemn. "When a worthy civilization faced extinction at the hands of a predatory force." In the conference room, with the Illyrian High Command assembled, Captain Donovan activated a holographic projector built into their wrist device. A three-dimensional map of the galaxy sprang into existence, with thousands of points of light marking inhabited systems. "Humanity has maintained a network of observation posts throughout the galaxy for over 300 years, Donovan explained. "We've watched civilizations rise and fall. We've documented first contacts, trade agreements, wars, and extinctions, including those caused by the Harvesters," Leora guessed. Donovan nodded grimly. "The Harvesters are one of several predatory species we've monitored. They've destroyed 17 civilizations in the last century alone." "And you did nothing?" Councillor Talus asked, her skin flashing with indignation. "We were preparing," Donovan replied calmly, "building our strength, developing our technology, and waiting for the right moment to reveal ourselves. Your deep signal reached one of our listening posts. When we analyzed your civilization, your art, your philosophy, your commitment to peace, we decided the time had come." The human manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on their system. Another spatial anomaly was forming, larger than the first. "That," Donovan said, "is the Earth Defense Fleet arriving. 120 warships, each carrying enough firepower to level a continent. We've spent centuries preparing to be the shield that protects species like yours from species like the Harvesters." The Illyrians stared in stunned silence as the display showed ship after ship emerging from the spatial anomaly, vessels that dwarfed their own defensive fleet and rivaled the Harvester capital ships in size. "Why?" Leora finally asked. "Why would you help us? What do you want in return?" Captain Donovan's green eyes met hers directly. "Because 300 years ago, humanity looked to the stars and made a choice. We saw what the galaxy truly was, a place where civilizations like yours, dedicated to peace and knowledge, were vulnerable to predators. We decided that if we were going to venture into space, we would do so not as conquerors, but as guardians." "And what you want in return?" "Alliance," Donovan said simply. "Partnership. Your knowledge of medicine and communication technologies rivals our own. Your philosophical insights could help us remain true to our purpose." The human turned to face the assembled Illyrian leadership. The harvesters will reach your system in 48 hours. When they arrive, they'll find something they've never encountered before. A predator that hunts predators. Humanity has hidden in the shadows long enough. It's time for us to step into the light. As if to punctuate the humans' words, the main display showed the last of the Earth vessels emerging from the spatial rift. The human fleet moved into defensive positions around Illyrian Prime with practiced precision, a wall of steel and technology positioning itself between the approaching harvesters and the Illyrian homeworld. Humanity had revealed itself at last, and the galaxy would never be the same. Guardians of the Stars. Dawn broke over Illyrian Prime's capital city, bathing the crystalline spires in golden light. It would have been beautiful if not for the tension that gripped the planet. In orbit above, two fleets prepared for battle, one approaching with the inexorable purpose of consumption, the other arrayed in defense of a civilization they had never met in person until 2 days ago. In the command center of the Illyrian Defense Station, Commander Leorithel stood beside Captain James Donovan, watching the tactical display as the harvester fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. They're earlier than projected, Leora observed, her skin patterns pulsing with tension. They detected our arrival and accelerated, Donovan replied, his voice calm but his green eyes hard. They're curious. They've never encountered our kind before. The human tapped his wrist device, communicating with the Earth Defense Fleet. Leora marveled at the efficiency of their command structure. No visible signals, no lengthy transmissions. The neural implants that all human military personnel carried allowed instantaneous communication, a technology far beyond Illyrian capabilities. Your people should prepare for the possibility of surface attacks, Donovan advised. We'll hold them in orbit, but the harvesters are adaptive. Some may break through. Leora nodded, dispatching orders to the planetary defense forces. Such as they were, the Illyrians had never developed the kind of weapons that could stop a determined invasion. Their civilization had focused on art, science, and philosophical advancement, not warfare. The harvester fleet is moving into attack formation, reported the sensor officer, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her skin patterns. 23 capital ships, 72 support vessels. They're scanning us, Donovan noted, studying his own device, trying to analyze our capabilities. And, Leora asked. A cold smile touched the human's lips. They're about to learn that some things in this galaxy are best left unanalyzed. On the main display, the harvester fleet accelerated toward Illyrian Prime. The massive ships were black silhouettes against the stars, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Their organic-looking design had always struck fear into the hearts of spacefaring civilizations, until today. Earth Defense Fleet, this is Captain Donovan. The human spoke into his communicator. Execute Operation Guardian. Show them what happens when you threaten a civilization under our protection. The human ships moved with sudden, coordinated precision, accelerating to meet the harvesters halfway. No warnings were sent, no demands for surrender. The humans had studied the harvesters for centuries. They knew diplomacy was useless against such an enemy. The first shots were fired at a distance that should have made accuracy impossible. Beams of concentrated energy lanced from the human vessels, striking the lead harvester ships with pinpoint precision. Where they hit, the seemingly impenetrable hulls of the harvester vessels simply unraveled, matter itself breaking down at the subatomic level. Quantum disruptor cannons, Donovan explained, noting Leora's shocked expression. They selectively destabilize atomic bonds. Very effective against the harvester's regenerative hull material. 3 harvester capital ships died in the first volley, their massive forms twisting grotesquely as they disintegrated. The remaining vessels scattered, adapting their approach with a speed that demonstrated their hive intelligence. They're learning, Leora observed. They always do, Donovan agreed. That's why we never used the same weapon twice in the same engagement. As if on cue, the human fleet split into smaller attack formations, each employing different weapon systems. Some fired missiles that phased in and out of normal space, bypassing the Harvester's defensive screens entirely. Others projected fields of distorted gravity that crushed smaller vessels like insects. The largest human battleships opened fire with weapons that bent light itself around the Harvester vessels, trapping them in localized time distortions where they aged centuries in seconds. It was beautiful and terrifying. Warfare elevated to an art form by a species that had spent centuries preparing for this moment. The Harvesters fought back with desperate ferocity. Their energy weapons, capable of dissolving matter at the molecular level, lashed out at the human fleet. Occasionally they found their mark, but the human vessels possessed defensive systems unlike anything Leora had ever seen. Shields that absorbed energy and redirected it as weapons. Hull materials that repaired themselves almost instantly. And most impressive of all, a spatial manipulation technology that allowed them to briefly shift partially out of normal space, causing Harvester weapons to pass harmlessly through them. Outside the observatory window, the first of the new joint Earth-Ilarian defense platforms was being constructed in orbit. It would be one of many, a visible symbol of the new order emerging from the ashes of the battle. A desperate signal had reached into the void. What had answered had indeed shaken the galaxy, not with terror, but with hope.